coming out to an event that I myself am really, really looking forward to, because so often my generation or our generation doesn't know the history behind things. And so often does our generation not appreciate not only the history of what we have, but appreciate the process, the energy, the everything that was exhausted so that we could be where we are today. And the reality is that all of us are nothing but dwarfs standing on the shoulders of giants, meaning that we are nothing but people. The reason why we're able to achieve the heights that we're able to achieve is only because of the efforts of the amazing people that came before us. So tonight, we are extremely blessed and honored to have amazing guests with us, all of whom were involved directly with the building of the ISBCC. And it's only through, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's success, through their hard work and their diligence and their perseverance, that we have this amazing facility and we're able to try to have a semblance of a community that we have today. So I would just like to start off by our guests sort of introducing themselves. We'll get into backgrounds and all of that later, inshallah, but just who are you, your name, inshallah, so that everyone can know who you are.
My name is Muhammad Ali Salam, Hajj Muhammad Ali Salam.
My name is Sabria Asiya Ayesha Ahmed.
My name is Kalima Abdul Noah.
So Jazakumullah khair, thank you so much. So we know that you all were involved in the building of the facility and the masjid. But before we get into that, I think it's only right that we sort of understand who you are as individuals. And why is it important that we even understand your stories, or excuse me, I want to know who you guys are and perhaps your journey to Islam, so that it can start to shed light on this building and this community and where it is.
Want the short story or the real deal?
We have time for the real deal.
Okay, well, I'll make it quick. I was born in Panama on the Canal Zone long time ago. I came to Islam after immigrating to the United States in 1950, and I joined the Nation of Islam when I came to Boston. Came to Boston in 1969, and shortly after that, I joined the Nation of Islam because I was interested in Black people doing something for Black people. Short time later, by 1975, I left the Nation of Islam and became a Sunni Muslim and took my Shahada at Masjid al-Quran from Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. He gave the Shahada to 20,000 people over the telephone. You can believe it. So that's how I came to Islam, and many members of my family since have embraced Islam, but I'm taking too much time.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Sabria Ahmed. I came into Islam. I embraced Islam when I was 22 years old, about 50 years ago. And I was, at that time in my life, it was, that was when the riots were happening and people were assimilating, they were separating themselves from being slaves and being, we just wanted to stop that nonsense that was going on. We wanted freedom, we wanted respect, we wanted our rights. And we had a lot of organizations going on for us. We had the Republic of New Africa, the Black Panthers, lots of organizations that we had lots of meetings and rallies, Franklin Park and, all over the place. And, we went from meeting to meeting, to meeting, and it just seemed that the only thing that was really, really real was Islam. And everybody talked a lot, and but in reality, you know, Islam was the only thing that had any substance to it, And being a person, I always prayed and always wanted to have a relationship with Allah, and so Islam was the choice for me, and that was when I embraced Islam.
Um, I, my sister became Muslim about a year before me. She turned 22. I think I came when I was 23. And what happened was she had uh, she had married Dawood Ahmed. He was an imam. As I understand it, he came into the faith when he was in the service and he was exposed to Islam. He says, "This is the way," and it was basically we follow the way of Malcolm X. We got this sooner and having Muslims from all over. I mean, we was impressed with that. So this is what we were following, and so we used to make salat in each other's houses and homes. It was just a few of us, but we'd take turns take the salat in people's homes and things like that. And then maybe we'd make Juma and someone and come together and make Juma. And then we got into a apartment on Richfield Street, and then and that was on the second floor on Richfield Street, and we started having regular prayers, regular prayers in Juma every Juma, and we celebrated the 15th Shaban, and we of the Eid, and then there was Muslims. There was a group of Muslims on Cedar Street, and there was us. It was just a small group of us, right? And at that time, okay, and so okay, so I'll stop there.
MashaAllah. So there's clearly a lot of history that, unfortunately, all of it we're not going to get to tonight. But from something that I heard from both of you all, or all of you all, rather, is that something that was really, really important to not only embracing of Islam, but making part of your identity and what fueled your passion to be Muslim was racial and social justice. And so, was this a part of the culture of Boston, specifically Roxbury and Dorchester at that time? And was this something that the Muslims cared about? Why?
Cared about justice. We cared about justice for not just for ourselves, but for all. I mean, we supported when we supported the underdog when we went marching for the Palestinians when they to the State House and to the place. I mean, we believed in defending the right. We believed in defending all. That was our creed.
Allahu Akbar.
Well said.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. So, how much longer? Because it sounds like you all sort of embraced Islam around the same time. Well, they were first, MashaAllah. Where can you give us a timeline as to when the conversation? So at that time we have Masha Quran, and Masha Alhamdulillah, right? Okay.
Not yet. We didn't have Masjid Quran or Masjid Alhamdulillah. Okay, we were there was a mosque on Cedar Street. Before that, we had prayed in storefronts, and then had we used to pray in whom I married Dawood Ahmed when he was the imam at the time, and we used to pray in his apartment for Juma. And then we got an apartment on Richfield Street. It was like a one-bedroom apartment, and we turned it into the mosque. We painted the the room, one of the rooms, into a blackboard or green board to learn our Arabic. And we had the room in the front was for the prayer room, and we had the kitchen. And there was a grapevine in the backyard. We really felt blessed, alhamdulillah. And we had a Arab, different Arab teachers would come and teach us surahs in the Quran, and we were there for, I guess, a year. We made Eid prayer at Ceylon Field, and at the Eid time there were so few of us. We put a maida down on the floor, and the brothers were at one end and the sisters were at the other end. And that was our community. That's how big we were. And we prayed the Eid prayer over in the Ceylon Field on Columbia Road. And then after that, there was an incident in our family. We were living on Maywood Street, and for some reason, I don't know, somebody threw a firebomb in our house when my husband was the imam. My son was 8 months old. And so after that, we moved to Rosendale, to live with my mother for a while until we got an apartment out there. And then the brothers moved. We didn't have the mosque on Mitchell Street anymore. There was a storefront on Dudley Street. And the brothers, had formed a little, brother. There was Muhammad Yahya, Kareem Jamal, Dawood Ahmed Attar, and I'm not sure if Noor Islam was there yet, but he wasn't there yet. But they would meet there, and continue meeting. And from there, my husband was no longer the imam. Then I think Kareem Jamal was the imam, and they rented 724 Sharmat Avenue, one side of a brick building on Sharmat Avenue. And then the floors were unfinished. We didn't have any rugs or anything. Alhamdulillah, we had a story building.
What year was that roughly?
That was the year. That was about let me see, my son. Okay, it was 70. 73. Alhamdulillah. So yes, and we grew from there. We had, I think Kareem Jamal was the imam for there, and then it was Noor Islam for a little. Then we had Ahmed Attar was the imam for a little over a year. After that, we had a vote. With the sisters and the brothers got to vote, and we voted for my husband to come back and be the imam. That was and he stayed the imam for the rest of the next 20 years.
The Society of Islamic Brotherhood bought the building in 724 Sharmat Avenue. And what happened was at the mosque, as we were growing, I always remember we were still small. We'd be surprised. We'd go out and would say, "Oh, I saw a Muslim today. It was so fantastic." I mean, it's not like today when you see Muslims all over the place, right? It was a big deal then. Okay. And the Society of Islamic Brotherhood, we grew and then what happened was Saudi Arabia and different Palestine, different countries, they wanted to support us. They wanted to see Islam grow. So they supported us. I mean, they sent us money. They sent the mosque money, and they said they would send crates of Quran, and we used to give Qurans out. This is part of our dawah, giving Qurans away, and so to enlighten people. This was part of our, what we did. And so the Society Islamic, we had Muslims from all over the world. I mean, from Ethiopia,
MashaAllah.
Palestine, Nigeria, Jamaica. I mean, all over the world.
MashaAllah.
And then as we grew, eventually we had a school. We only had about 12 students maybe in it, right? But it was important to us. We had a school, and we had and then we also between grants and money that came in from internationally. We had a restaurant and a bookstore, and then Sabri, you want to take it from there?
So, mashallah, it sounds like in the 70s, y'all were really trying to establish that. I know that Mesh Quran as well was going because you took your Shahada at Mesh Quran. So, can you give me a little bit, just a vignette of what was going on? Because these two small communities of Muslims in Boston are really flourishing, whether in silos or together, but they're really starting to grow. You know, Imam Warfdeen is the head of Mesh Quran or the direction. You just give us a little bit of insight.
Well, Warthing, I would characterize as being the spiritual leader of a national movement. And 1975, excuse me, is when I took my Shahada, and I was praying at Masjid Alhamdulillah. Actually, that's where I learned how to pray. Before I go any further, I have to give thanks to Allah first, and also to thank the people of Boston for making it possible for us to get this land and allow us to go forward to build the masjid. The process that we had to follow was laid out by a place called the Boston Redevelopment Authority. Yeah.
Before we get into the land, tell me about when you made Hajj. Dua that you made prior to making Hajj or while you're on Hajj.
Man.
I think that's like really important, especially for the young people to understand what to make a dua and then to follow through with this.
Pressure is nothing to this guy. Let me see if I remember. I took my first trip for Hajj in 1981 when I was at Masjid al-Quran. I'm sorry. W.D. Muhammad had a program where he would sponsor 300 Americans for Hajj. Didn't have to pay anything. A round trip airline ticket on Saudi airline was $800. I didn't have that, but I took advantage of the opportunity. And when I was on Hajj, someone told me you get what you pray for, somewhere along the line. And I said, you must be kidding. Anything I ask for, I can get? They said, yes. So at the time, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. So I said, I'm going to pray for my mother. My mother and I's relationship was very special, and I loved her very much. So I prayed for her to get better. And when I came back, you know when your prayers are answered. Nobody needs to tell you. And I knew I was on Mount Arafat. I knew my prayers were answered. So around that time, when I came back, I made a commitment to myself to build a masjid in her honor. And that's what I did. Sounds simple, but you have to understand also that I had a relatively special relationship with the then mayor, Thomas Menino. And again, the people of Boston was very supportive, very supportive.
You came back from Hajj after making this commitment to build the masjid in your mom's honor, because alhamdulillah, your prayers have been answered. You're working at the time at the BRA. Can you explain a little bit about the BRA and the role that it had into allowing us to get this?
Boston, excuse me, the Boston Redevelopment Authority is the city's development agency. If you're going to build anything at all, you need to go to the BRA to either get a permit to build, to approve the plans, to make sure that everything is just right. This particular piece of land that we're sitting in was made available in 1964. And over 200 apartments were right here. The problem that we had, though, was that these apartments were considered substandard. Some of them had indoor plumbing, some didn't. And they decided, the city decided that they needed a plan to redevelop the underdeveloped parts of the city. And in Roxbury, they decided that they would tear down these 200 units of apartments and eventually have them rebuilt. The trick was for us, was to find out how to build, because at that time, there were no people of color building anything. Did not know how to do it. You didn't have the resources financially, or you didn't have the relationships. My mother told me one piece of advice when I was coming up, and she said that nothing happens unless you have a relationship with people. Okay? If you do nothing else, work with people and do as good job as you can, because at some point it'll benefit you and benefit your family. So I took it to heart, and I got a job at the Boston Redevelopment Authority. And that's where I began to come into my own, so to speak. Became the senior planner for the city of Boston, focusing on several neighborhoods. And I had to rewrite the zoning code for Roxbury. It was the first one, and came Jamaica Plain on. But once you master the building process, then that has tremendous value if you are.
So, did you work for the BRA before or after your Hajj?
In 1981. I joined the BRA in 1984.
Made this commitment. You now get the job at the BRA, which will allow you to, in '84, before I was born, will allow you to sort of now fulfill your.
What did you say? You were born?
No, before I was born.
Before you were
Before I was born. I was born in '89.
Okay. Okay.
So
interesting, as my buddy would say.
So, when did the process start of actually acquiring this land, and what happened there?
Well, this is where Masjid al-Alhamdulillah and Masjid al-Quran come into the picture. At the time, I was praying at Masjid al-Alhamdulillah, and I hooked up with Imam Dawood and decided, if you're going to do this, you have to do it in a way that is financially sustainable. So you have to have an organization, you have to get incorporated, you have to have 501c3. Sorry for speaking so fast, but that's the uninteresting part. The interesting part was that you had to build a facility that would be amenable to the people. And the first step in that process, once you get organized, is to establish the uses that would be available in the building. So when you think of a mosque, what do you think of? Salah, school. And as we took a survey of all of the mosques, including Quincy, which I'm sorry that I didn't mention sooner, we would ask people what would they like to see in the mosque. Everything boils down to people wanted to see a mosque just like home. That was it. You have to have a door for the sisters to enter, a separate door for the brothers to enter. Brothers pray here, the sisters pray there. That was it. There was only one mosque, believe it or not, that said something that was far-sighted and amazing. That is, Masjid al-Quran made a request for a place for washing the dead because their community was relatively elderly. They were experiencing a steady attrition of members, and they wanted a place to bury Islamically. It was put into the plans that this is one of the uses that will be offered at the facility, and Allah is my witness, that was done. But it was just, if it wasn't the first masjid in America with a place dedicated to washing the dead, it was among the first.
This is roughly the late 80s when Masjid Alhamdulillah starts to, or you're starting to scout the different communities to figure out what they even want in a masjid.
Right.
And so then around that same time, Masjid Alhamdulillah establishes the nonprofit to have that happen. And so what happened from there?
Well, the entity they formed was something called the Muslim Council of Boston. And then from that, the community, the non-Muslim community, had some vacant land in Roxbury that the city owned, and there was a desire to have that land developed. So they developed a process called the RFP, which is request for proposals. And what will happen was the city would put together this proposal, invite people to compete and acquire the land. The price of the land was insignificant. The use and the timing in which it'll be reused was most important. So where you're sitting right now was originally cleared to be a part of Interstate Highway 95. This was supposed to be a gas station, McDonald's restaurant, and a rest stop. That was it. Where the community college is today was originally intended to be a part of a 8-lane highway going from Maine to Florida called Interstate 95. So in 1979, the governor crushed that plan and said, no, we need to rebuild the houses that were torn down to build this highway, and we need to get as much local people involved as could be done. So we put together an RFP, and there was only one submission, one response to develop this land, and that was from the Muslim Council of Boston. So the process that the BRA used was tailored for the city. Probably you couldn't do it in many other cities. where you get someone who may not have experience in building, but has the desire and can get help that they need if you have money or connections. But over time, as this came together, we started meeting people, and that's where Mayor Menino comes in, because he was basically a supporter from day one.
So now the Muslim Society, Muslim Council of
Boston.
of Boston, Muslim Council of Boston, which consists of Masjid Alhamdulillah, was Masjid Quran in the council as well?
Yes.
So, Alhamdulillah, the two masajid are now coming together. They acquired the property without any dispute, Alhamdulillah. But you mentioned that you needed the funds or the connections. I'm sure you had the connections, but a lot of money went into building the facility. Was
Right.
the Muslim Council of Boston able to, which comprised the Masjid Alhamdulillah, Masjid Quran, what was the process of acquiring the funds? Was that easy? Did it take time?
It wasn't easy. It definitely wasn't easy. But that's a story that has to be told on another day.
All right.
The Muslim Council, I should say, was made up of Masjid Alhamdulillah, Masjid al Quran, Islamic Center of New England. I believe Masjid Noor was a part of it as well. Imam Dawood Ahmed was the first president of the organization, and they're the ones that responded to the proposal. The land that you have now is 95,000 square feet, or a little over 2 acres. When we were responding to the proposal, I believe the land that we didn't have was maybe 30,000 square feet. All that to say that the amount of land that we had to work with for the mosque originally was only to be built on what was about 60,000 square feet totally. Follow. I hope I'm not confusing anybody.
So, okay. Throughout the process of trying to, alhamdulillah, it sounds like this was a collective effort of multiple masajid, multiple different communities, of even multiple different ethnicities and backgrounds all coming together to build this masjid that we have today. What were some low points? Felt like that's it. We're just going to hang it up.
Hard time raising funds. We were trying to raise funds all kind of. And what happened was, way before, as I told you, we had a lot of money coming from internationally. But what happened was the government decided that we could not have international funds to build a mosque. So that froze the money. So that funding was cut off. So we're still trying to raise funds. And what happened was the land, because we didn't raise funds, the land was undeveloped for quite some time. Now, when we had an act in the Masjid, alhamdulillah, Dawood Ahmed, Imam Dawood Ahmed, he actually ran a competition so they could come up with blueprints for the masjid. And after they come up with the blueprints for the masjid, it took about a year before, for them we had two winners. I don't know the names of the two architects, but who was the finalists, but they were the finalists. And once we had the blueprints, that was the time we were supposed to go out to the community. So we went out to the community. We went to the Freedom House, Dorchester. We went to the First Baptist Church there, and we went to synagogues. We had support of rabbis and ministers and community directors, but there was at this time when the money had funds had been cut off. At the same time, we had not been able to develop it, so we went undeveloped for quite a long time. We used to have volunteers to go to make sure at least to clean up the site, because people would throw trash in an empty lot, so we had to really work to keep it cleaned up. But we was afraid. What happened was, as we said, we had a time limit. And we might going to lose it. Okay, and at the same time, there was some people who had opposition, some community groups, and they wanted to take the land away from us. They said this land is undeveloped, or they want to take it away from us. But Mayor Menino, he was our staunch supporter. He said, no, he said he felt that we had a lot to offer the community, and he wanted to see this mosque built. And he said we had so much to offer, which at that time, we weren't just talking about mosque, we were talking about mosque in school, a mosque in school. That was mosque in school. Okay, so what happened was, as we said, we went to all the Muslim community, we were trying to raise funds and everything, and then we went to the MSA. The MSA, they supported us. They were the people who said they not only support us, they're willing to take full reign of it, and they're the ones who gave support. So we didn't lose the land. We were afraid. We prayed that we wouldn't lose the land, and alhamdulillah, Allah answers all prayers, and we were able to maintain, hold on to the land. Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
So in the building of the mosque, we first had to design a building. And then once the building was designed, we had to make sure we had a reasonably good handle on the cost of the building. The building that was originally planned expected to cost $6 million. $6 million today will get you maybe a couple cars. You're not going to build a masjid for $6 million. In any event, $6 million was the world. It was I mean, we just couldn't imagine $6 million. But after 5 years, we couldn't raise the $6 million. And the city has a policy that if you win the competition for the land, sits there for 5 years, then they'll take the land back. So the Muslim Council was advised by me to write a letter to the city saying that they wanted to be de-designated. And by being de-designated without prejudice, it would mean that in the future, if they could get some resources, financial resources to build, then they wouldn't be excluded from the possibility in the future. And maybe someone else can come along and build the mosque or build something. So that was a rather painful period to experience, but it's something that we felt we had to do. So the letter was written, and I delivered it to the Corporation Council, took a look at it and said, Muhammad, if you don't build this masjid, you're not going to ever build a mosque in Boston. I may be paraphrasing to be a little dramatic, but that was the bottom line. And we came back, and we told the brothers, and they came upon the idea of, well, maybe there's someone else, some other Muslim community that can build a mosque. Some brothers did come forward, 9 brothers. They incorporated under the name the Jami Masjid of Boston. They submitted they had a meeting. They never developed any plans because in order for them to go forward, they had to get the permission from the Muslim Council of Boston that they could build something that everybody could enjoy. So they didn't get very far. Then along came the Islamic Society of Boston, which at the time was a bunch of graduate students in Boston, Cambridge, and they were doing all of the prayers on college campuses. That's how they got started. And one thing led to another. Brother who we all know, Saud Ahafi. Saud was an engineer for the state at the time. And he and I met and he was the one that suggested that someone from the ICB, Islamic Council, Islamic Society of Boston, ISB, that they might like to see the land so that we can still build a mosque. So that's how they came into the picture. And they met me, well, I should say who the Islamic Society of Boston was at that time. May not know some of these people, but brother named Ali Tauba, brother named Dr. Walid Fatehi, Usama Kandil, Anwar Kazmi, maybe there's two or three more, but they came together and they formed the Islamic Society of Boston. And when I took their representative, Dr. Mohammed Atawiya, around the block, we came to a family that lives next to Ashura's restaurant. And his name is Willie Brown. He was the owner of the house and he was washing his car. So Muhammad Atawiya goes up to him and says, "Brother, excuse me, how would you like it if a mosque was built next to your house?" I said, "Oh man, what did you just do?" So just as he said it, and Willie was about to answer, his wife opened the front door and she came out and she said, "Do you mind if I answer that, dear?" I said, "Go right ahead." Then she went on to say that she had done her library science studies in Morocco, and she spent 2 years living next to a mosque in Morocco, and she was awakened every morning at 5 o'clock by the adhan, and it was the most beautiful sound she ever heard. I looked at Dr. Atawiya, said, "I didn't set this up." You know, she's telling the truth. I just said, "SubhanAllah, look at that." So Dr. Atawiya says, "Well, I think we will take this project on." And the architects that we went to, first we had some locals, Brother Muhammad Sabur, Brother Rashid Ashraf, and a few others that had no understanding whatsoever of what religion was all about. But with the exception of Rashid Ashraf and Mohammed Sabur, they were the only two out of 20 different architects that had any idea of what Islam was and how our religious services are run. Can you think of any?
After the competition, yeah, give us a model. That, okay, and that's the model that we had in the mosque.
So as far as like timeline goes, we're talking early '90s now.
Talking early.
Just so I can make sure my timeline is right. Make Hajj in 80 something, early '80s. Make your dua. '84, get the job with the BRA. Then the MCB, Muslim Council of Boston, is formed. Their 5 years goes by, so very, very early '90s. You were going to hand in your letter and realize that that wasn't the best decision. Then at around that same time in the very early 90s, you meet what is now known as the ISB, many of which those members are part of our board of trustees. Um, and they decide to take on the project, leading what has been already started, um, which now is the ISBCC. So now, now in the early 90s, the ISB has taken on this challenge of building the ISBCC, or now what is called the ISBCC. What are some milestones that happened throughout that process? What is the MCB now? How is their involvement in?
Well, the I have to say that there was one problem with the plan that we just said, and the problem was since the mosque was going to be built in Roxbury, the board of directors of the mosque would have to be African Americans. If it wasn't African Americans, it wasn't going to be built over my dead body, you know. So some people had that attitude, and it was a compelling argument that they put forward. So what do? So we had a meeting at Masjid al Quran. This was the be all and end all meetings. This meeting went south, you would be sitting here. So if I'm not mistaken, Imam, it was in your office. You recall? The meeting was in the library just outside the Imam's office, Imam Talib Mahdi's office. Imam was there. I was there. Dr. Walid Fateh, he was there. Brother Nathan Sabir? I don't think so. But at that meeting, Imam Abdullah Farooq was there. And at that meeting, Imam Abdullah made the same objection. As an African American community, you got to have African Americans on the board, which sounds perfectly logical. Exception that if you're going to build a mosque, if you're going to raise money overseas, you have to have people on your board that people over there know, that people over there knows members of their family, that they could monitor that the money that they give is going to be used for purposes that it was given. That was undeniable. And the truth was we didn't have any relationships or families overseas that had that type of resource. So Dr. Walid said, brothers, let's come to an understanding. There's no question that the blood of the African Americans are in the very soil in the United States. And anything that we build has to acknowledge the fact that you can't, we have to give you resources so you could teach Islam and be the face of Islam in America. But right now, we have to get started somewhere. So, fundraising purposes, said let's, get together, agree that you'll be the teachers of the deen. In order to get it built, you have to be able to raise funds from around the world. God knows best, but I started crying. Man, crying. But it was the most amazing response that I could ever imagine. From that meeting, commitment to go forward and give them the designation. A 2 months later, a new architect, Dr. Sami Angawi from Saudi Arabia, he designed the building whose model is outside the office. And that was the standard looking for. Still had a long way to go, not the least of which is that had a budget initially of $6 or $7 million. Dr. Sami's plans were finished. Looking at a building cost more than twice that. That building is unique in that it originally was intended to have 2 levels of underground parking, each level having 100 spaces. We note at the time, but one space cost of yes, I'm trying to figure out what the cost per space would be, but the cost for the masjid came in $25 million, not 6 or 7. And when we saw that, we looked at each other and said, can we do it? A gentleman named Minhaj Kermani, structural engineer, he saved the project by proposing that instead of building it all at one time, we build it in phases. What you're in is phase 1. Cafe, the back wall where the soda machine is. Beyond that wall is phase 2. On the model, but if I didn't tell you that there was a phase 1, that makes sense. But phase 1 costs $16 million. That's where you're sitting right now. Everything you see. Plenty of work to get to.
Didn't the original building also include the building of a school? Isn't that one of the phases? The building of a school?
The building of the school was one of the main purposes we even decided to go down this path, because we didn't have adequate schools to teach our kids. And when I say adequate in the sense that, it was according to building code, and it was something that was first class. And this being Boston, the city would not allow us to do something second rate. And Dr. Sami Angawi and Dr. Waleed would not accept anything less than the best that they could do. So I can't emphasize the importance of the school. In the design for the school, the space for the school has bathrooms that were tailor-made for kids. If you can imagine, we now are accustomed to adult bathroom facilities, but for someone in the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, needs something a little bit smaller. So what we learned as we went. And that's why I have to give credit to the city of Boston, the people of the city of Boston, because they may have known all of this from day one, but the fact that they continued to persevere and encouraged me, and Mayor Menino, he got behind the project big time.
Actual the building for another. But sort of wrapping things up before me, what are some things that you'd like to see out of the next 10 years?
You're a pro at this. My goodness.
10 years. The audience, what
10 years.
No, see, I want to hear from you. You
Okay.
guys put your sweat. Alhamdulillah, it's here.
Okay. I would like to see both schools connected all the way up to high school. And I would like to see much larger prayer facility, much twice the size as it is now. I would like to, and I would like to see a space for, I know the sisters pray upstairs, but some of us are handicapped. I'd like to see a space for the elderly and the handicapped. But I know it has to be big enough because we have so many. Brothers, so yeah, double the space that it is now.
Be possible.
And I'd also like to see a garden expanded. Because it should be Allah's garden. It's Allah's. That should always be a part. Mainly the school, the madrasa, and madrasa. But when you
I guess the important lesson for those coming after us is to know that there are people that will help you if you put in the time and the effort that needs to be invested. Don't do anything part of the way. Be prepared to ask questions that you don't normally associate with if you have a question, and keep persevering with what you're doing. Just don't stop. People might think you're eccentric, going to ice cream shops with plans under your arms, but that's what it takes. Minhaj Karmani, I cannot tell you the debt of gratitude that we owe him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But when I say he saved the project was bid at $24 to $25 million by 4 different companies. So there was no question that the price was realistic. But that being said, how are you going to get this thing built if you don't have the money? Well, what Minhaj did, he said, let's take out one level of parking, 100 parking spaces. Let's just take it out. That 100 spaces cost $5 million. So he saved, $5 million from a $25 million project. And he said, let's cut off the school. Next phase. That saved another $5 million. So this is how this thing came to be. And Allah knows it's Allah's house, not our house. and Allah will take care of his house.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you all so much for coming out. I took some notes, if you don't mind, and there are some beautiful points that I think were really running through your whole story. But I think to summarize it, it was all love and service. The entire thing was sincerity, love, and service for the community, wanting a school, wanting a place to pray, starting out without even having a masjid, and then now, alhamdulillah, we have this amazing, beautiful facility, being blessed and content with very little. Also, something that I heard in your voices, in your spirits, the importance of dua and really having a firm commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having sincerity and conviction in that. Though at many times there was no knowledge of even how to do it in RA, really having the trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this was going to happen.
Just remembered something. Forgive me. Outside of City Hall, there's a coffee shop called Starbucks, and there's a kettle right in front of it. Well, before Starbucks was even Starbucks, I got a phone call from a developer who wanted to see the plans, the survey of the land, because he wanted to build something here. So when I heard it, I said, well, how am I going to not give this guy the plans? So I said, well, hey, as for it, I'm going to give it to him and see what happens. So I gave him the plans, and I walked back to my office. With those plans went the dream of the project. I get back to my office, rest, I leave, come back the next day, plans are on my desk. Got a phone call. So-and-so, call me when you get in. I get in, I see the note, I called. The voice on the other end said, Muhammad, I had a meeting with the mayor yesterday. He told me to give you back the survey of the land because the mayor said he wants to make sure that the project was dead. I saw this guy the day before. Now there's life back into the project. We just have to raise $20 million.
I mean, that is a beautiful into the next point, that it's a collective effort. And the beautiful advice of your mother that nothing happens without relationship. Bless her and have mercy on her soul. That even the idea of Imam Dawood, longitudinal thought to not have international funds, how that could have been, and even in the actual process, we didn't talk about how having international funds really the hiccup in things. Probably be important too. But that idea, that foresight, no, we're not even going to have that because we want to make the perseverance and the ability to make our decisions. When all just leave this up to Allah, and Allah sent another sign and another sign, time after time. The acknowledgement of that Kandil had of the history that had happened right here in these lands. How this area was built and lived by African Americans. That foresight, the acknowledgement of what happened. And then also the creativity that everyone had. That it wasn't enough to say that we're going to build it, we couldn't do it. Well, you had the brothers, okay, we'll get rid of this, we'll get rid of the parking garage, we'll get rid of the school, build it. They're all things that I think for us as youngsters, really, that we can take away from this story. It's not just the story of the ISBCC. These are benefits that I can teach my children and we can all apply to our lives today. That we have to have the love, we have to have the sincerity, we have to be creative, we have to have the forbearance, though at times things may look. But we also have to appreciate those who came before us, because without their knowledge, without their dedication, without their wisdom, without their foresight, we really have. So again, I just want to thank you all. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and reward you all and everyone that was involved in this building of this project with Jannat al-Firdaus, nothing less than the highest level of Jannah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that through every sajda, every prayer that is made, you all get a reward, an equal reward of that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive and raise and rank those who have passed that are no longer with us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise them to the highest level of Jannah and allow all of us to reunite in Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this meeting isn't just another lecture, but we're able to take from the benefits and apply them into our own lives so that we can follow up with those dreams and those aspirations and really, when we meet on Yawm al-Qiyamah, make you all proud. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the perseverance, give us the sincerity, give us the love and the service, the awareness, so that we can continue on this message and do this good work. Ya Allah, Ya Kareem, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam ajma'in. Jazakumullah khair. Barak.
25 years, there was a willow tree that stood like a sentinel on the site. You know where the eight-pointed star is in the marble? That's approximately where the tree stood. It was 52 years old, getting ready to fall at any time. A willow tree has roots that grow relatively near the surface. So as the construction equipment went back and forth, it would ride over the roots and it would kill part of the tree. So after many months of machinery being on the site, the tree showed signs of falling. If it fell, it would take out any one of those walls. That's how big this tree was. And a local citizen, D. Prim, I don't know how I remember her name, D. Prim made one request, and that was we not cut down this tree. $25 million project. Jeopardy because of this tree, and the tree is going to fall. So what do? So had a study done by the Massachusetts Audubon Society. Trying to find the study. That study is on how to preserve this one tree. Yeah, we even got plans that showed you couldn't walk straight through to the cafe from here. You had to go around it. But at any event, the Audubon Society didn't charge us for the study because they had respected us for trying to save this tree. Study. And as a result of the need to tear down the tree, we said that we would build a garden. And we have a landscape architect who prepared some plans for the garden. Have to build it as the last component of the build out would be this garden. Story.
Good evening and good night.